Recap, bottle up, bar, recap, bottle up, bar, recap, bottle up, bar, recap. Jung jugga 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 recap show. It's the recap show. It's the recap show. Hey, welcome everybody to the recap show. I am your lovely host. Thank you so much for your patience and tenacity. I apologize that we started a little bit late. I apologize that you're looking at my belly button. Hello, everyone. Guys, my eyes are up here. Come on. Oh boy, that's embarrassing. You guys, stop objectifying me. I know I'm a delicious piece of man meat, but really, there's a soul behind this lovely facade. Hey, everybody. There we go. So, welcome to the recap show. I'm your host. I'm Tom Lommel. I'm the creator of the Dungeon Bastard. I am here to share my frustrations with you about my internet, but I'm not going to do that. That's ostensibly something I could spend a good 10 minutes ranting about. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead enjoy a delicious beverage and drown my brain in caffeine. Listen, I do too have a soul. It was promised to me upon my baptism. So, what do we have on deck for today? Today is, it's a little light today, which is fine. I was hoping to have a few other things prepared for you, but that did not work out. I was busy yesterday, and today I've got the dog, so things got a little bit out of control. So had to take care of our good boy Luigi. So today, a couple of simple things. We're going to cover the recap. We're going to cover some missed opportunities, things that I think could have gone better or differently. And we're going to do a little Q&A. So if you have something that you want to talk about, whether it's about your game, my game, games in general, gaming that's happening, or gaming you'd like to try, feel free to hit me up. Try to kind of hold those things off until I'm done with the missed opportunities and whatnot, and we will cover those then. I have a hard time. If you pop something in the chat now, I might talk for 25 minutes and then forget what your question was. But start those wheels a-turning if you have. I have some time for some Q&A if you want to cover it. I'm happy to share my wisdom and insights. So, thanks everybody for joining me. I'm glad you're all here, and it's a glorious Friday here in Southern California. Let's get started with what happened. Shall we? We shall. So, as we discussed on Tuesday, the climactic... Honestly, I feel like this was maybe the climax of the adventure. I think one of the things going forward that's going to be difficult is to top the dramatic arc that we have built, because honestly, this storyline that I've created around Jorgen / Harshnag has become a huge campaign arc going all the way back to some of the first sessions that I played, and has now finally paid off. And everything else that's coming ahead in the rest of the story, it's a little anticlimactic. It doesn't carry the same drama with it. The characters have not developed the same close relationship with Jorgen that they have with the key of like reforging the Ordning. Like, that's all they understand is we have to go see some giants to reforge the Ordning. That's a very ethereal goal, right? That's hard to. They don't know what they have to do in order to do that, so they can't start thinking about ways to strategize on that. And they don't have as much of a personal investment in it as they did in helping Jorgen. So, in some ways, I feel like the campaign has peaked with this last session. And surprisingly, the rest of the adventure may feel a bit like mechanical or a bit of a denouement. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I think we'll have to, like, we should discuss that some more. I think what we could do is begin raising the stakes on the carnage that the giants are now inflicting on the realms, and that would make the issue more personal and urgent in the minds of the players. But for now, yeah, there have been giant raids. It's somewhat affected them, and they know that giants are wandering about doing things, but I don't think, I would honestly, like, if it was up to me, I would destroy a couple of cities, a couple more cities, maybe. Maybe I can just go back and say, I told them that, like, Bryn Shander had been attacked. Maybe I could have word come up that Golden Fields has been raided, and now food prices are spiking, and there's a skyrocket in the amount of panic going on because this force of hill giants, and make them more competent than they were originally supposed to be in the adventure as written, so that now the food supply for the winter has genuinely been threatened, and everyone is kind of starting to maybe make plans for war if they have to raid another kingdom for their food stores or another city for their food stores. So that's not really the recap, but that's sort of where we're sitting, honestly, like at the end of the session story-wise. When I look at the entire arc of the book, I've had a really big session here where we talked about how Jorgen was going to get his revenge and challenge Lord Storvald to reclaim leadership of his clan, and that did happen. That's the quick recap. That did happen, and now there's going to be this moment of like, so now what, right? And that's something that happens every time you have a campaign, like a key campaign moment where you've been focusing the player's attention on one single thing. Now what? Oh yeah, there's this thing with the giants. It's really amorphous and kind of abstract, and I don't get what an ordning really is. It's some sort of law that the giants had, or divine rule, and now it's broken. But like, why do we care? Why do we reforge it? So we'll maybe talk about that more on Tuesday when we cover our prep session. But that's like just sort of like before we even get into the recap, like that's one of the things that's weighing on my mind. This was a big plot point. It was a big push pin in the map of our adventures, and it's going to be hard to top this. That's something that I'm concerned about. So think about that. Let's recap the session. They had been holed up in the Temple of Thrym. They had released one of the white dragons, the adult white dragons. They had sort of, in the process, therefore, set the rest of the Svardborg compound on alert. They had managed to convince a couple of the giants to come over to Jorgen's side. So I had talked about, okay, perhaps depriving them of a long rest, and perhaps draining some more resources with some giant attacks, and getting some of the the ragged barbarians involved, and maybe sending a sortie of yetis after them, etc., and really kind of like wearing them down, and kind of starving them for the resources that they would normally regain on a long rest. You can't really, it's hard to deny them a short rest unless the Krieg Vin comes like rolling right up to Svardborg, right up to the glacier or the iceberg, comes rolling right up to the iceberg right away after they after they got rid of the ice dragon. And that felt a little too convenient and coincidental. So I talked about doing that, but the other thing I talked about doing was pre-rolling a bunch of the combat, right? So that because we had so many giants involved, I was going to pre-roll a bunch of the combat, and therefore I'd be able to just cross-reference a chart of of rolls and know round by round whether a giant hit or not, or what armor class it hit, etc. Now, I will tell you that I did do that. And I will also tell you I did not use it. Okay? But it was a very worthwhile activity. And I'm going to show you why. But I want you to put yourself in my frame of mind, which was, let's starve them for resources. Let's make this I want this to be a tough fight. So I'm going to put them in kind of a compressed space where there's not a lot of room to maneuver. Maybe there's a few tactical things on the map. But I want them to, like, maybe not have all of their spells, maybe not have a long rest. And I'm thinking they'll fight Storvald and 6 giants, and they won't really have any reinforcements, right? That sounds like a tough fight to me. Like, Jorgen and the 6 party members versus Storvald and the 6 giants. So I sat down with my little sheet of paper and started rolling my out all of my hits by the frost giants. Now, keep in mind the frost giants are +9 to hit, and they do 3d12 plus 6 damage. That's not it. That's a little something else. Here we go. All right, so here we are. I named my frost giants. That seemed like fun, right? So Arnthor has 2 attacks every round. He hit AC 26 and AC 24. Gunborg did not do so well. He hit AC 11 and AC 13 in the first round. Elof hit AC 22, AC 24. Well, I know my player's AC, right? So I'm going, all right, well, there's 6 die 12 plus 12. There's 6 die 12 plus 12. There's 6 die 12 plus 12. This guy missed. That guy maybe missed once and definitely hit once. There's 3d12 plus 6. All right, that's a lot of damage going on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7 times 21d12 plus 42 points of damage getting flooded into the arena. All right? So I was like, all right, well, these guys really can crank out the damage. Now, I kept going into, that's not what I want to do. Don't do that to me. Frost Giant Arena, come on. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. There we go. All right, I keep going. The dots that you see in the yellow are critical hits. So, round 2, we get a critical hit. That's 6d6 plus 6d12 plus 6. Round 3, I get a critical hit. I get another critical hit. Round 4, I get a critical hit. I get another critical hit. These are all nat 20s that I rolled on the dice. Round 5, hey, good news, everybody. We get our first natural 1. Wow. Round 6, I get 2 more critical hits. Round 7, I get another critical hit. Round 8, another critical hit. Another critical hit. Round 9, 3 more critical hits. Round 10, 2 more critical hits. Round 11, well, if it goes that long, if it gets that long, nobody gets critted that round. Round 12, another critical hit, right? So I went through and I'm looking at my results. And I decided this is bizarre. This is way too overpowered. I don't know that the party, like, admittedly, if they kill the first 2 guys in the row, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crits that don't happen, right? But they got to kill those guys by round 2. If they kill one of them by round 3, 1, 2, 3 of them goes away. But that is, I tried to update the. It's on my screen. It says Disorganized Play GM Prep, so you might need to I can't change there's a glitch in the thing that says we're streaming Overwatch. The title is correct, but I can't change the little logo thing. That's just a glitch with the restream stuff. So sorry about that, guys, but we're not actually playing Overwatch right now. So that's the buzz. That's the dealio there. So the net result of all of this, I feel like this is sort of like a player piano where you play along and then all of a sudden you see the various musical notes come rolling in, right? Boom, boom, boom. Like, this is the part where I was like, no, that's enough of that. So that's what the effect of that was. I dramatically changed my idea of what the combat was going to be, right? Because I thought it was going to be a brawl with 6 fire giants and Storvalds, and I had set up the rules where minions can attack other minions, but minions can't attack the leaders in the combat until all of the other minions are dead, right? So what that means is Jorgen is challenging Storvald. It's essentially sort of mano-a-mano combat. But Storvald, or Jorgen, is able to call on anyone that he likes to step up and volunteer and fight on his behalf, or fight with him, okay? Fight on his side. And then Storvald is able to call on anyone in the tribe to fight on his behalf, fight on his side. But the rule is you can't have those champions who join you, they're not allowed to dogpile on the main guy until all of the other minions on that side are dead, right? So in other words, this combat is set up according to the rules that I set forth, and I decided that this was like the divine rule of frost giants. Like Thrim's blessing came down upon, you know, the party, and it came down upon the battle arena and enforced a rule of honor, right? So what that means is you can't have all of your minions focus fire on the bad guy, walk up, and then one-shot him. Your minions have to fight his minions. And your minions are only allowed to attack the challenger once all of those people are dead, right? So that way, it seems like a fair fight. And also, it means that numbers matter, okay? So if the challenger steps up to Storvald and says, "Who will fight with me?" and 20 frost giants join his side, and then Storvald says, "Who will fight with me?" and only 2 people step up, Storvald can, at that point, abdicate his leadership and go into exile and be cast out of the clan of frost giants. Likewise, if the challenger steps up and says, "Who will fight with me?" and only 2 people step up, and 20 members of the tribe back the ruler, he can be exiled. So there's a noble way out of this. But then once you're in the fight, you got to stay in the fight. You can't have people join in later, and you can't, if you voluntarily leave, you're out, right? You're out of the combat. So that's the way it was set up, and I thought it was going to be a brawl of kind of basically straight up magical might, or not magical might, but just fisticuffs, right? 6 frost giants, 6 frost giants plus the Jarl versus the 6 members of the party and the frost giant Jorgen. I looked at the pre-rolls and I decided, number one, this is a lot of hit points, and they're going to take a beating, right? Because all the frost giants have to do is kind of like flush them into a corner and then just start chopping on them. And with all of those crits, that's just going to be a brutal amount of damage. The other thing that I realized was I did not want to get out this sheet of paper and start going through combat around the table and go, "Oh, well, I'm sorry, but he scored a critical hit, and you're taking 6d6 plus, or 6d12 plus 6 points of damage." Like, that would invoke a level of incredulity or introduce a level of disbelief into the game. Where it's like, what do you mean? Those numbers are just written down. I didn't see it. You know, the advantage of rolling in the open for all these combat rolls is the players see what the result is. They know what happened. Like, they're attached to the drama of what comes shaking out of your hand. The disadvantage is it slows things down. But that, to me, I was like, that's a trade-off. That's a better trade-off than having all of these crits happen where they don't see the actual natural 20. No, seriously, guys, at home, I rolled it and I got a natural 20. Like, I don't think I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do, but I also don't think it's unreasonable for players to feel skeptical or feel like, well, you just roll all this stuff at home. Like, why aren't you rolling it in front of us? You know, so feel a little bit sort of betrayed by the mechanic. So, the other thing, so what did this lead me to, right? This led me to, in my prep, this led me to get rid of the idea that there was going to be 6 Frost Giants. That was too much. It was going to be a bruiser combat, and we're looking at a TPK. So how do I make this thing a little more balanced? Number one, I eliminated 2 Frost Giants. Right? So I got four mooks, or four regular Frost Giants, and Storvold. Number 2, I decided, all right, I'm going to let them long rest before Storvold shows up. They're going to have full abilities, full hit points, and this should be a tough fight for them. But rather than go through some combat or go through some like harrying techniques that prevent them from taking a long rest, which is going to eat game time, I'm going to like fast forward through the front of the game as quickly as possible so that we can get into this big climactic combat, right? So that was the second thing that I decided. This whole idea of denying them a long rest, that went out the window. That's fine. Let's have them come in full strength. This is going to tax them. I still wanted there to be an element of surprise, and I still wanted the stakes to get raised on this thing. We talked a little bit about how to raise the stakes on a set piece encounter on Tuesday. So I made one pivotal decision that ended up changing the nature of the combat entirely, which is at the end of last session, or toward the end of last session, Nilron had said, Nilron is the Zentarum mage who's hanging out with Storvold and using him. And Nilron had sort of cut a deal with them, like, I'm going to take off, you guys do your thing, I'm going to do my thing. And here's some information that you may be able to use to free the dragon. Enjoy. The delicious twist that I added into this session was Jorgen challenges Storvold. Jorgen says, "Who will fight for me? I am your rightful ruler." And everybody in the Frost Giant camp kind of like looks at each other, and then they just kind of like look down and kind of toe the ice a little bit, right? And that was fun. Like, that was a fun role-playing moment where they're like, they want to do the right thing, but they also think you are probably going to lose. So that happened. But then the situation flips, and Storvold says, okay, who will fight for me? I'm ready. And nobody says they will fight for him. And that was kind of the Giants' way of like, well, you know, maybe we'll even the odds here and see, you're so rough and tough, why don't you prove yourself? So he badgers his sons into joining him. That's how we get the 4 Frost Giants that come in. And then he kind of makes this, like, babbling speech about how you're all a bunch of cowards, really a bullying kind of speech, where you're a bunch of cowards and will no one stand up for me, and you know that I will, you know, restore the Frost Giants to glory, and he's the son of a coward, and da-da-da-da-da, right? Will no one else join my side, is essentially what he says at the cap of this long tirade. And suddenly, poof, this guy appears from out of invisibility wearing a black cloak and long beard, and Nilron shows up and says, you know, Lord Storvold, that I have your side in your aims, just as you have my side in my aims. These pretenders to the Black Network don't know what they're getting into, and I will be happy to join you in your crusade to defend your title. So, now all of a sudden we've got 4 Frost Giants, the Jarl, and a mage involved. A mage with a wand of fireballs. That's that was a pivotal decision that I made that totally changed the tone. Not necessarily completely the outcome, but certainly the way that the combat played out. So that was all of this was a result of me going back to this set of pre-rolls and going, that's too much damage. Okay? So ultimately, I did not use this sheet that I thought I was going to use, but it proved insightful to me and allowed me to change my preparation in a way that was far more useful and far more interesting than just having 6 hill giants attack. So keep that in mind. So just kind of like pull all of this together into like what actually happened, right? They decided to long rest and not dicker with any of the other giants or try and convert anybody else. They talked about it, but I fed them some information through the 2 giants that they had converted that these guys are kind of the cowards of the group anyhow, and maybe you talk the barbarians into gold, but mostly they're being used as slaves and bullied, and they're not probably, like they probably considered doing some recruiting, but I informed them through the voice of the giants that they weren't going to be particularly successful. The next morning comes around and they hear the war horn sounding and they see the Kriegwind come storming right at them, like storming towards Svartborg out of the dawn light across the frigid green, frigid blue ocean. This thing comes whistling across and they can hear the frost giants in the rows pulling on the oars. Huh, huh, huh. And at the very front and standing in the bow of the ship, they see Storvald, and he's yelling with rage, and the long strings of spittle are like emanating from his mouth and catching in his beard, and Storvald rams the Kriegwind directly into Svartborg, right up the gut, lands it right in the middle of the lagoon, like shocks the whole glacier, right? And he steps off the boat and just bellows, I hear we have some rats here in our hunting lodge. Well, fortunately, we know how to deal with rats. And he throws something against the side of the nearest building, and it hits and kind of makes a thump, and then it leaves a long, stringy red trail in the snow. And as they look closer, they can see that it's the head of Marcus Gove, who was the captain of the ship that brought them here. So clearly, Storvald has hunted down that ship and destroyed it, right? Or at least that's the implication. So then we had the setup to the fight where Jorgen challenges Storvald, and I let one of the players who you guys have adventured with Jorgen long enough. Who wants to make Jorgen's speech on his behalf? You know enough about the background. You know enough about what he wants. You know enough about the way he talks and whatnot. Who wants to role play Jorgen? So that happened, and that was a fun and interesting moment. And the player actually brought up some things that mattered to the Frost Giants. He pointed out that it seemed like Jorgen's father had been poisoned, and that's why he wasn't at his full capacity when he fought Storvald, etc. So he brought up some good points. It didn't end up, the players were disappointed because it didn't end up converting any Frost Giants to their side, but then they were rewarded by the fact that nobody would stand up for Storvald after they had said this stuff. So it sort of evened itself out, played out. And then we got into, basically, I had described some of the rules of this combat in terms of minions can't attack the leader. The leaders can attack anyone they want. If they want to help chop down the minions so that their minions can attack the other challenger, great. But however you want to do it, it's fine. So I explained the rules and that this was a holy thing, etc., etc., etc. And then we got into the combat. So the way that worked was Storvald freezes the entire lagoon over, and then he draws, he traces a rune in the air and freezes the whole lagoon, freezes over, and then he goes and they have some sort of, so Jorgen, steps forward and draws a circle on the ice and says, you know, by the blessing of Thrym, I hereby challenge you to combat, to defend your title as ruler of the clan Harshnag or whatever it was. Then Storvald steps up and says, no, we will not fight under the rules of Thrym. There's a new god that the clan worships, and we shall fight under the divine auspices of Vaprak the Destroyer. And he traces Vaprak's rune in the ice, and then this big ice arena forms around, so they're standing in sort of this canyon of ice, and all of the other frost giants are like looking down on them. Gee, I wonder what that looks like. Did Tom draw a map? Oh, I think he did. I haven't copied this into the Dropbox folder, but this is the map that I drew. So let's scroll it around a little bit. So they started on either side of this, and then it doesn't go very far, right? So it's fairly narrow. It's not super long, and it really compressed the combat, right? So that's where they were. That's where they're having their battle, and then battle was joined, and there was 4 minions, or 4 minions. I keep calling them minions. They're frost giants. So there's 4 frost giants on one side. The party's on the other side. With Jorgen, the Jarl is sort of in this what I would call southern area down below, and Nilron is also with him down there, right? So on round 1, a couple things happen. I'm not going to go round by round on this thing, but round 1, a couple things happen. The cleric banishes one of the frost giants. Okay, so now it's 3 against 6. And there's the frost giant, and then of course there's Nilron. That's the other thing that happens. Nilron casts greater invisibility. Okay, so he disappears, and then on round 2, while they're pressing the attack, and the first 2 fire giants kind of like begin working their way, or fire giants, the first 2 frost giants begin working their way forward towards the party. Nilron hangs in the back invisibly and starts firing off his wand of fireballs. And so everybody the rest of the party who was holding back, kind of like waiting to pull off ranged attacks and cast spells and things like that and stay out of the fracas, they're getting fireballed round after round after round. All the support guys get fireballed round after round after round. And, you know, finally the cleric got fireballed like a 3rd time and blew his concentration check, and the guy who was banished reappears. So now there's a fresh combatant ready to roll back in the fight. So that was the main factor that made this a very tense and difficult encounter for the party. Was the mages cast greater invisibility, and he's popping off fireballs every single round, and it's 8d6 on at least 3 characters. It's just all the guys who are holding back are softening up and softening up. By the way, also the other thing to consider here is I made it very clear to the party that if any of the minions accidentally damaged the leader, then the combat on their side was forfeit, and it was over, and Jorgen would basically be put to death. Right? Like, he was considered to have lost the combat. If any of Jorgen's minions, champions, whatever you want to call it, hit Storvald with an attack or did damage to him that he couldn't avoid. So one of the rules was like, oh, what about casting a wall of fire? Well, if there's a wall of fire that he can avoid somehow, like by staying behind it or something like that, then that's legal. But you can't accidentally hit him with a fireball. If you're going to fireball his minions, you better make sure he's not in it, or the combat's over. So that, but it was, that applied to both sides. So that was the rules of the contest, and it worked it really worked well. I mean, I guess a simpler thing to do would have been like, this guy's divinely protected from everyone else's damage until somebody, until all of his champions were dead. but I think that would have made the combat a little. Actually, it would have favored the party probably a little bit more. Maybe not. I mean, maybe Nilron would have just fireballed his side, relentlessly. But it having it set up that way, you don't want to accidentally damage that dude, made them think more tactically and be a little more shrewd in their spell choices and where things were going to go off, etc. So that was the battle. That was the battle setup, and that was kind of the opening salvos. It went a full 10 rounds. The last, I think, round and a half or 2 rounds were strictly spent focusing on Nilron, who was using every single wizard trick that I could come up with, whether it was Misty stepping away from people, casting greater invisibility again to regain cover, casting shield as a reaction. There was a point where I don't remember what the sorcerer was going to do something to him. No, he was going to cast a spell. Nilron was going to cast a spell, and I don't remember what it was. It might have been Misty Step. It might have been Magic Missile. It was going to be Magic Missile. And I said, he's going to Magic Missile. He's casting Magic Missile, and it looks like he's targeting the monk and the bard. And the sorcerer, the Dragonborn sorcerer, said, "I'm going to counterspell." And I said, "Okay, you're gonna counterspell." "Yes." "All right, Nilron's going to counterspell your counterspell." "Okay, well, it automatically fails. That's it, right?" So every single advantage I could wring out of being a magic user, I absolutely wrung out of that last round and a half of combat. Firing those magic missiles, making sure that the 2 people who were weakest on hit points both went down because of those magic missiles. Counterspelling the counterspell that would have taken those out, all that stuff. It was. I think it would have set some of the players back, except for the veteran players at the table were like, "Yeah, he can counterspell your counterspell, and that just doesn't work." That was so great. That was, they were. I mean, it was. Those were all legit tactics, but they had recognized, yeah, he's doing exactly what I would do. He's playing him smart. He's playing him he's really playing. This is, yeah. And I told them at the start of the game, I'm trying to kill somebody, right? Not a particular person, but I'm not going to hold back on this combat. And again, when you roll in the open, you don't hold back. And I don't think there was the only thing that I didn't hold back on was if somebody went down, I didn't have a guy chop, he's dead, critical and take him out. Now I could have, right? And the other thing to keep in mind with this combat is everybody in the party has more than enough money to pay for a res, right? So it would be disappointing if people died, but it's not going to be a major setback where they didn't earn XP and their character's sheet dead and there's nothing they can do, etc., 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 right? So it took a full 10 rounds. It was we played right up to the end when we had to get kicked out of the FLGS, and it was exactly the combat that I wanted it to be. Huge set piece, dramatic, lots of twists and turns, and the major thing that set it apart from, I think, every single other combat that we've had was the addition of a mage, artillery unit in the back, just grinding away on all of those guys who were providing support to the frontline fighters. Admittedly, also, the PCs had some awful rolls. There was I remember the fighter rogue did an action surge and then missed 3 attacks by rolling 4 or less on all of his d20s. So there was also some bad dice luck that I don't have control over, but it also, it causes some frustration, but it also raises the stakes too, right? So that was, we ended basically with the guy, with Storvald falling, and that was it. We had to cleaning everything up and get it going, get out of there. So we didn't have any time for handing out treasure, divvying up loot, or whatever, any of that kind of stuff. I had been hoping we could get maybe to that piece of it and at least roll the treasure in front of them, but that didn't happen, which That's fine, whatever. So that was the session. It was climactic. It was a great dramatic payoff. It was exciting and tactical. There was something interesting I felt happening almost every round. So good fight, everybody. Good job. Proud of you. I thought there could, well, so that's the next part, right? Missed opportunities. What did not go off or go well in terms of things that could have been different? So I talked about making your environment more dynamic. There were a couple holes in the ice that they didn't use. You know, they could have tried to like slam somebody into the ice, like knock them over, but nobody tried to do any sort of shove attacks or anything like that. So that was a feature on the map that didn't get used. I think maybe I could have had the Frost Giants use that a little bit more strategically and kind of like led the party to see the advantage or disadvantage of standing next to those things. There were also some giant ice flows, like ice stalagmites on the map, and those didn't really get used much except for providing shadows and stuff for the Shadow Monk to step into. But it did provide some like terrain features for them to maneuver around. Like, can I get through here? Nah, not really. Maybe. Yeah, you can get through that. You can squeeze through there. It's difficult terrain. That sort of stuff. So I think it would have been nice to have a few more, something that was a little more dynamic, could have been dynamically deployed, whether it's like ropes that you could swing across or something that you could like throw and explode or knock down and create difficult terrain. You know, something of that nature might have been made it more interesting. I'm trying to think of other missed opportunities. I did not put enough thought into them trying to recruit forces to get on their side, right? So they were lobbying giants like, you can help us. They wanted to lobby the barbarians. You can help us. And I shut that down. I wish I had thought a little more intelligently or maybe a little bit more indulgently about like how that could work. How we could, so I would have changed the battle arena if they had gotten those 18 barbarians out. Now it would have complicated the combat, but you could have divided them into, those guys you could have divided into like mobs of 6 and go, okay, well they do 4d6 worth of damage or whatever it is if they hit. So that I wish would have been, I would have spent a little more time on. But overall, I think I also could have started my prep a little bit earlier. I started at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday, and I needed to start it probably Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, kind of get it together, start putting my thoughts together instead of waiting till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because by the time I got the pre-roll sheet going, and then I suddenly discovered, oh, I really need to change this dramatically, then I was starting to get under the gun. And I was like, oh, I got to get my miniatures together. I got to draw a map for this, you know. So that was tricky. Those were missed opportunities. I don't have a bullet point in here for this, but I do want to cover this. Some things that I thought went extremely well that I changed from the book as written. You know, apart from there's this whole storyline of Jorgen going off and looking for revenge against his father and reclaiming his rightful crown, right? If you were to run this as written out of the book, it almost seems like the fight should be taking place on board the Kriegwind, right? I don't know, that seems a little bit weird. I was glad that I invented this arena and this ritual thing, right? And I think you could use that even if you didn't have Jorgen. Like, you could come up with a reason, hey, we represent the small folk, and we are here to defeat you and challenge your right to raid our territorial lands. We're calling a duel of honor before the almighty Thrym, and we will abide by Frost Giant ritual combat to settle this matter, but we don't want you, intruding on our lands anymore, and we're here to put a stop to you, the 6 of us. And I think that would actually also be a dramatic, appropriately dramatic scenario if you don't have this whole revenge storyline going in your particular campaign. I think there is something where if you set it up, it wouldn't take much setup. Though, you know that there's this ritual combat that can be called upon, etc., etc. Or maybe we're just here for the conch. We will fight you in ritual combat to the death over this conch. That's also an easy angle, but both of those things I think would work. So, point being, if you set this thing up, I think the arena is a valuable, creating some sort of battle terrain that you can fight on. This does not look like much, and admittedly, when I drew it, I was like, well, I want to have a map, and I know that this is going to be a very tactical combat. I was running short on time. I don't have a lot of great interactive ideas for this map, so I'm just going to make it kind of like a bulgy area in the middle and that tapers to like either end where both sides start fighting. And then I threw in a few obstacles with the ice stalagmites and the pools that broke through to the harbor below, right? But what it did do is it provided some natural choke points because the giants can't get through and surround you very easily. And it also kept the fight from being about a lot of moving around. Sometimes moving around is great. If moving around is a lot of run in, hit somebody, and then run away, it can get a little tedious, right? So I thought the arena worked out well. I thought the addition of Nilron was honestly one of the best things that I could do to change that fight. So having an element in there that is a ranged combat option that they have a really hard time attacking, right? Now, if I had a giant who was throwing rocks at various members of the party, number one, it's not an area of effect, right? And number two, the sorcerer and the ranger who are hanging out in the back can go, yeah, all right, well, that guy... I can see that guy. I'm going to start targeting that guy with spells and missile weapons, right? But because he was invisible, they could not do that. So that was something that worked well in this particular combat and really made it a much, much more difficult combat than it would have otherwise been. And then thirdly, I took my own advice from Tuesday, and I replaced Lord Jarl Storvald from the book as written with one of the Frost Giant Everlasting ones. And that was really... It really made a much better monster, a much better boss monster than Jarl Storvald as written. As written, he gets a couple advantages of water walking or whatever, and he can cast Hunter's Mark. But other than that, he's not much different than a normal Frost Giant. And I knew that he was going to be fighting Jorgen, who Jorgen is beefed up. Jorgen has more hit points than an average Frost Giant, and he's got all that armor, so he has a 21 AC, and he has that giant axe that's magical, it gives him another +1, right? So Jorgen, as statted, even against the spellcaster, still has the edge. You put in one of those everlasting ones, that guy has two key things. He has regeneration, 10 points every round. That's clutch. And he has the ability to rage, which means he takes half damage from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing weapons. Well, guess what Jorgen uses? It doesn't say he takes full damage from magical weapons. He has resistance against those types of weapons. So Jorgen was pounding away on this dude and trying to knock him down, and he would do 25 hit points of damage. Well, the Jarl's turn would come around. He regenerates 10. And not only that, but, okay, let's say Jorgen does 25 points of damage. He only takes half, so he's only taking 12 out of those 25 because of his resistance while he's raging. And then on top of it, his turn comes around and he heals 10 back, so he really only took 2. It also gives him a +4 to damage. So when this dude hits, he's doing, 3d12 plus 11 or whatever it was. It was gruesome how much damage he was doing. So that was the other final bit that I thought worked particularly well, was replacing him with the Frost Giant variant from Volo's Guide, and it made a much beefier monster, a much better boss. It really evened things out. But it also made people wonder, like, oh, what's going on? But some of them figured out right away. Oh, he's raging, and they're like, oh, God, yeah. But they've all played. They've seen barbarian players in action or barbarian PCs in action. They know, yeah, that's the way it works, isn't it? Oh, so those were the elements that really paid off. Adding an artillery spellcaster who could turn invisible, changing the big boss monster, and then giving him a full rest was good for them. But then having this arena and having these rules in place within the arena that you can't dogpile on the leader, you have to dispatch the minions first, and you can't accidentally damage the leader, or the combat is over. It's weird, but it also made the encounter special and meaningful, or more meaningful. So that is our recap. I will take 10 minutes of Q&A here if you have some questions about your game or something like that, something that you want to address. I said I would do it, and we started 15 minutes late, so I do have some things I have to tend to at 3:30, but it's 3:05 now, so I'll take 10 or 15 minutes questions if you have something in your game that you want to clear up, or you have a question about my game that you want to clear up. So either way, or there's a question about a game that you haven't played yet or whatever. I do want to make a pitch here for a couple things. Wes Otis is running his, while we're waiting for questions maybe filter into the chat. I haven't seen anything from you guys in the chat. Is everybody awake? Is everybody okay? Is it just my browser? I hope not. Wes Otis is running his Kickstarter for Plate Mail Games, a company that he runs, at Audio Loops. They're up to, I believe, like 100 tracks of audio loops. It's over 16.5 hours of background ambience that you can provide to your game. So definitely go support him. That's how he and his wife make a major part of their livelihood. So if you have not backed, I think you can get in for fairly cheap on the whole thing. If you want every single track, and I don't remember what the pledge levels are, but you can get in for $25 and call it good. The Strange is doing a new exclusive box set for The Strange. If you have played Numenera, The Strange is sort of the modern X-Files parallel universe version of that, so that's rolling right now. And then Dusk City Outlaws, which I have played and also run as an actual play here, is wrapping up. I think it's got 4 days left, and they have funded and they have cracked a bunch of stretch goals. I may be doing a Q&A specifically on Dusk City Outlaws and what it's like to run it. I haven't pinned that down. I was supposed to run a session of it this weekend over on Hyper RPG, but they're a little understaffed, and so that ended up getting canceled. But there's only a few days left of Dusk City Outlaws if you are interested in a fantasy heist game, which wouldn't normally catch my attention, but having number one, Rodney Thompson is a great designer, and he worked on 5th edition. Got a lot of interesting ideas built into this system. It's very easy and very approachable for beginners. And then secondly, they've unlocked some stretch goals that are really a big value add if you're going to get the box. So he's added, I believe it's 8 new sorceress types of character. There's the character classes that they have in the book. So there's 8 of them that deal with magic specifically. So that I'm excited about. There's a deck of enemies. So you're going to have a little deck of cards. Right now it's got 40 cards in it that have just the basic bare bones stats for all the different bosses and stuff. And that game is so lightweight that those things I think will really come in handy at the table. And he's added more artwork and a few other things, etc. But there's some really cool extras coming up. And we're not, usually the final 48 is when you see a big push. So I think we're going to see, probably some cool stretch goals get pushed down the line. But if you're not on board with that, take a look at it. All right. Thank you, Farquad, for popping those two things out there right now. Selden Arcays says, what's a good way to handle a mini boss fight that I have planned? The party would be very overwhelmed if I don't give them some sort of help. They're going to raid a bandit camp to help the local guards. So I think, yeah, so what you're looking at is you're not really doing a mini boss fight, right? There's going to be a boss, but the boss has a ton of minions at his command. So what you're really looking at is a numbers game here, right? And I think the concern that you might have, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the concern that you might have is they're going to start a fight. 30 guys converge on the 6 party members or the 4 party members or whatever. And then they all, even if they chew their way through those guys, they come out with like 4 hit points apiece. And then the boss of the camp just goes, dong, 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 and everybody's dead, right? That's what you're concerned, right? So this is a numbers game. It's actually a very similar situation to what we were faced with here in Svartborg, or what we were faced with in Ironslag. Like, on paper, the Jarl Storvald comes rolling in with 20 frost giants under his command, along with a white dragon, which I've neglected to mention. Like, they released a white dragon, and he basically like flew off. The party did not know this, but Nilron had gone out and found the Kriegvind and told Storvald, oh, they've released the other white dragon. These guys are here to, take you on. I don't know how they got here, but, he was whispering in his ear the whole plan the whole time. And so the dragon overheard, oh, my mate's been freed and she's recovered her eggs. I'm going to go find her. F all of you guys. I don't need you. So it's 15 versus 2. Well, so on paper, we had a similar situation where it was going to be like 21 versus 7 or something like that, right? Which is not, is dramatically, it's still problematic either way, right? So this calls for a situation where you need to obviously give your players some opportunities to even the odds in a way that is plausible and also interesting and dramatic, right? Now, I will say, my experience with this stuff is you feed players these elements and then they screw them up, okay? But the elements I'm talking about are things like giving them some materials or assets they can use to create a distraction, or to sow discontent, or to otherwise befuddle, distract, or drive off a significant portion of the bandit camp, right? So you could have a thing where somebody in town says, we found this old wagon full of this weird powder, and we call it smoke powder. We don't really know what it's for, but if you wanted to use it, you could have it for something. Okay, well, you just gave them a wagon full of dynamite, or whatever the premise is. Like, that's an incredibly weak premise. But the suggestion stands, give them some sort of big kaboom type of device, Let them build a catapult that launches Greek fire into the camp, or let them create the illusion of a monster or something like that. Maybe they are able to spread tales of a ghost spirit that haunts the woods, the spirit of a giant spirit troll that goes through the woods and eats those who have done evil in this world, etc. But the point being, give them something that they can take advantage of, that when they deploy it, it will negate or nullify a large body of the camp. So, there's a variety of ways to do that. There could be some sort of smoke pellets, or smoke pots that would cause the battlefield to get flooded with this thick smoke and fog, so that they can't tell where the combat is coming from. Maybe they have a one-time silence scroll or some sort of item that they can twist and pop and use that would allow them to travel directly to the boss's tent. Maybe there's some sort of one-shot item that they can use to create like a ring of burning flames, a wall of fire around them, so that they can't see into what's going on, and this guy doesn't want to jump through the fire in order to get out. There could be another, it is sort of, in some respects, speaking of heist things, you can set it up as like a heist caper. I'm going to sneak into their camp and I'm going to poison the food so that half the camp is beset with dysentery and they're not going to be able to join combat, right? So some of it depends upon what the main forte of your two players are, right? Do they like kind of these sneaking opportunity types of things, or do they prefer to take the battle kind of head on? So that's one thing to think about. The other thing you can consider is having them come upon friendly forces who are willing to help and either provide a distraction or provide a flanking maneuver or both, like come in from one side, start this big chaos, and then you have 7 rounds to sneak in the backside of the camp and go kill the bandit leader before their forces are whittled down enough that they have to withdraw and everybody else figures out what's happening, right? So there's a variety of ways to do this, but what you need to do is make sure that the premise that you've set up here is not a straightforward, boring fight, because they will not survive it, most likely. The only other way that you could pull this thing off, in my opinion, would be to have some sort of duel of honor, some sort of like gentleman's challenge where they stride into camp and call out, Devros, the one-eyed scourge of the Dale Lands, and he steps forward and agrees to fight them in some sort of gentleman's duel where the other bandits aren't going to intervene, right? And one final point that I've seen used in this type of scenario is, what if his forces are not loyal to him, right? So I deployed that in Svartborg, where some of the giants were like, right away, we're like, Jorgen makes a pitch, and he's like, no, okay, you're right. I recognize you as my lord, and I know this is a treasonous thought, but I'm not going to fight you right now. So you could have that sort of discontent already sort of be floating in there, so that if they do go waltzing in and try and fight, there could be a bandit malcontent who's like, yeah, Devros, why don't you take care of him? You haven't paid us in 2 weeks. I'm not just hungry, I'm waiting for my gold. Right? So you could have something like that as a premise that they maybe don't know about. If they do know about it, even better. Like, they can sneak in, buy some of the guys off, make an offer to him. I'll pay you 50 gold, throw the gold on the ground. Bam. Oh, well, all right. I've talked about it. Right? So that's another thing to consider. It's certainly something I deployed in Svartborg. These guys are not in lockstep loyalty with their leader. So those are some top level options. I think the poison one is good. The one way that the poison thing can go awry very quickly is if that PC, one or both of them, blows their stealth roll and then they get noticed or caught. Right? So that's the contingency that you have to plan for is, oh, what if their plan to go and poison these dudes gets screwed by somebody blowing their stealth roll and they get pinched? What's the response going to be? What's the advantageous outcome? What's the complicated outcome? And what's the worst possible outcome for how that particular scenario plays out? Right? So try and have some flexible options off of, or flexible outcomes off of how this thing could. I mean, if you look at your planning could be, okay, I've given them the materials to go in and poison a large portion of the camp. What are my possible outcomes from this event? Advantageous. They poison the dudes, and 95% of the forces are overwhelmed. Complicated outcome. They poison them, but the poison is not going to work as long as they think, and they have to act right away. Setback outcome, they get caught. Okay, well, if we spin off of that one, okay, they get caught. What's the best possible outcome for they get caught? They defeat the guys who catch them. That's probably the best possible outcome for that. They defeat or capture the guys who catch them, and or they get away with only minor bruises. What's the complicated version of they get pinched by blowing their stealth roll? They get in a fight, but they manage to get away, but they've been drained of resources. They get in a fight, they get away, but the rest of the camp has been alerted to their presence. Okay, that's a complication type of outcome. And then finally, what's the setback outcome of they get pinched? They get defeated. Well, the worst option is they get killed, but I don't usually cover that one. It's kind of an end, unless you get to a certain level where it's like, okay, how do we resurrect them from getting killed? I don't really bother to account for that thing. But the setback outcome here is they get captured and stripped of their gear. They get hauled before the leader, and they don't have any of their equipment or any of their spells or anything like that, right? So that's those. If we use our planning method that we talked about last week, that will help you think of, okay, here's the weak points in their plan. Now I have some options for what could possibly happen to them. And it's also a great outcome is they get pinched, and the guy that pinches them is like, oh, hey, what are you guys doing? Hey, well, I'm not very happy doing this. Oh, no. Or, he captures them and he's like, I should turn you in, but I'd rather get a little bit of gold and just let you go. Like, that's a great outcome, too, right? They can buy their way out of it or bribe their way out of it. Even better outcome out of that is they bribe the guy, and he's like, oh, yeah, I'll let you in the camp later tonight. Don't worry, I'm on guard duty from midnight to 3 a.m. It's the worst shift in the entire day. So if you break your prep down, like, I don't want you to spin off into millions and millions of possibilities, but if you break your prep down like just 2 or 3 steps into here's the situation that we've set up. Here's the ways it could go good, it could go complicated, it could go bad. And then spin off of those, like, obviously, the nice thing is, the advantageous outcomes you don't really have to spin off of, right? They successfully poisoned most of the camp. You don't have to do, like, okay, well, what's the best possible outcome of them spinning off of the camp? That doesn't matter. Like, their life isn't complicated. There's no complication off of that, right? That's a success. The mixed success, they get caught, but they get away. Okay, you might want to spin off some complications of that. And certainly, the setback outcome of this event, you definitely want to spend some time thinking about, like, okay, well, they're fats in the fryer. What are some plausible ways for them to get out of it, right? So, your original plan is give them some guards. They turn that down. They like the idea of poison, so that sounds like it will work. And currently, the bandits steal food and supplies from the town, and you could poison the supplies before they are taken with a lower risk for themselves. I think that's a perfectly plausible plan. The only thing I would challenge the players is how are you going to do this so it doesn't seem suspicious, and then give me some rolls to see how well you're able to conceal the poison inside the foodstuffs or whatever, right? But then spend some time thinking about, well, if I'm going to force them into that role, what are my outcomes for that action, right? All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. I apologize for the lateness of the stream, but we got some good chats in today, and I think, it was a good session. I was very happy with how it worked out. As I said at the top of the stream, I'm going to have to put some thought into where we go next week, because it looks like we're headed to Maelstrom. So that will be... I want to make sure that the drama keeps building. We've had this huge momentous moment. There's going to be a moment for us to take our breath and get some treasure and, reflect upon our victory, but then push forward and I think we've got about 5 sessions left, right? So we better kick things into gear. Let's take a look at what's on the calendar for the rest of the week here on Saving Throw, shall we? All right, it's Friday. That was Disorganized Play. Tonight, speaking of Mr. Wes Otis, Call of Cthulhu Black Bag Vikings is on deck tonight. So please join us for that at 8 p.m. as the crew continues their their campaign of infamy. Tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., if you're a Patreon backer, you will have a special backer-only chat with our illustrious producer and head honcho, Mr. Dom Zook. So tune in for that, for those of you who are back our Patreon. We have some exciting things in store, and that's always the first place to, number one, get it from the horse's mouth, and number two, hear about changes that are coming to the stream in advance of when they're actually coming. At 12:30 p.m., Mr. Stephen Pope is DMing Masks, our superhero game that is powered by the apocalypse, sort of a Teen Titans style game, so tune in for that. And then finally, at 5 p.m., it is the epic season finale of Phoenix Dawn Command. If I'm not mistaken, this may be the last appearance of Mr. Saxcar in the DM seat on Saturday night, which, he's very busy over at producing the Geek and Sundry Network, so no blame there for him having to step back. I believe it's been announced that Mac Beauvais is going to be taking over DMing duties there, but don't quote me on that. Tune in at 10:30 tomorrow, and you can ask Dom about it. So that's happening tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Who knows how late that will go? Theoretically, 8 or 9 o'clock, but, Dom's always looking forward for a reason to kill a few more characters. And then is the miniature painting show this Sunday? It doesn't have it on the calendar. I know it's coming up. It might be next Sunday. It's the Oscars this Sunday, so God only knows. I can't imagine they'd make people try to go to West Hollywood the day of the Oscars because traffic around that area is awful. Also, I am going to put some thought into probably hosting an impromptu chat about Dusk City Outlaws, the system, running the game, prepping the game, playing the game, etc. If people are interested in that, hit me up at the Dungeon Bastard. There's only a few days left in the campaign, and Rodney's kind of under the gun, but I may do that before the campaign is over, just as one of these vlog type of things. Like, I'm going to kick back and talk about this. Maybe I can get Rodney to Skype in, and we'll both chat about it. I don't know, but I'd like to get that. I'd like to get one of those cranked out this weekend, possibly tomorrow, possibly Sunday. Not on Monday. Monday night is Monday Night Dungeon Fight. We have a special all-improv troupe coming in. Friends Tyler Rhodes' wife and her improv troupe are coming in to play Monday Night Dungeon Fight on Monday. So if nothing else, tune in for that. This has been Disorganized Play. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And until next time, let's dungeon. Oh, you can't defeat me, OBS! I'm the king! Wait, what do I click to make the sound go off again?